What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community, I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Nik Wallenda. Nik is a seventh-generation member of the Flying Wallendas, a circus family known for performing dangerous feats without safety nets. He has 11 Guinness World Records and a list of death-defying feats like nationally televised tightrope walks over Niagara Falls, the Grand Canyon, Times Square, and an active volcano. He has been walking the wire since he took his first steps, but he had never experienced fear until a tragic accident in 2017. For the first time, fear overwhelmed him, and Nik had to learn how to move on, release the past, and get back out on the wire. Most of us will never walk a tightrope, but we face things that scare us every day. That is what our mutual friend John C. Maxwell told me when he called to introduce me to Nik Wallenda. And my good fortune is that Nik asked me to help him tell his story in his book titled Facing Fear: Step Out in Faith and Rise Above What's Holding You Back. Whether you are putting yourself out there socially or seeking a dream job, all of us allow anxieties and fears to hold us back. Today, he is going to share his story so that we can overcome our fear.
If you don't pluck that weed out immediately, it'll eventually spread seeds and germinate, take over the whole garden. I started watering those seeds. Yeah, you know what? You are a failure. Yeah, you could fall. Look at your sister. That fear got so powerful. I remember going down in tears, telling my wife I was never going to get on the wire again. I was defeated. There's something so powerful about a positive mind. I can promise you I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have that mindset.
Nik, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Don, thanks so much for having me on the show.
You know, you have just been one of my favorite people. The gift that I had to learn from you and develop a friendship with you, I hope will flow to everybody that's going to get a chance to listen today.
I hope so as well. And I have to say the same for you, Don. Everything that I've learned from you and the time I've spent with you has always been a pleasure. And I look forward to the future.
Absolutely. Nik, looking back at your life's history, you grew up in a family that spent its lifetime collectively performing, entertaining others, doing it in a reasonably dangerous place, pretty high up. Tell me about this 7-generation family tradition.
Absolutely. So my family started performing back in the 1780s over in Bohemia, eventually making their way to Germany. And in 1928, my great-grandfather brought our family over here to the United States to perform on Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. And first performance in the US, they were performing at Madison Square Garden, the old garden in the city, of course.
Oh my gosh.
They had just finished this amazing routine of feats on the wire, and they completed and came down for their final bows, and the audience went crazy, whistling, screaming, and foot stomping. My family was frightened. They ran to their dressing rooms in fear. Back in those days in Europe, whistling and foot stomping was the same as being booed off the stage.
Oh, really?
They thought they were failures, but the reality was they were called back to the arena floor where they received an unprecedented 15-minute standing ovation. And we've been performing in the US ever since. My great-grandfather was extremely innovative and creative, performed for many, many years, created the 7-person pyramid on the wire, and eventually lost his life walking between 2 skyscrapers in San Juan, Puerto Rico in 1978. He was 73 years old at the time, and he was walking between skyscrapers about 200 feet up, halfway out on the wire. He started to lose his balance because the wire was rigged improperly. It was moving rapidly under his feet, and he went down to hold that wire, which is what we're all taught to do. And unfortunately, lost his balance, wasn't able to hold on, and lost his life. Less than 6 months after that, I was born, and that was sort of the legacy that I had inherited.
Oh my gosh. You mentioned the rigging on your grandfather's wire and the fact that it wasn't quite as stable as you had hoped. The attention to detail that you have to give in your situation, generally, it's life or death.
That's right.
If you're not attentive to the little things,
Yeah.
I've been amazed by that. What have you learned in your career and what you've done about the importance of that management of detail?
I tell my team constantly everything matters. Often a new team member will look at me like, what do you mean? Everything matters. Every single detail to me matters, whether I'm marketing another show, whether I am setting the wire up, which again can be life or death. It's whether I'm filling out a contract, even if I'm sweeping the stage, everything matters. I try to lead by example in that sense, but the reality is my great grandfather lost his life because his team, I don't want to say they were negligent necessarily, but everything didn't matter maybe. My great grandfather trusted his team. My dad would rig for him, my uncle would rig for him. They weren't available for that event in Puerto Rico, so he had other team members rig. And unfortunately, because they missed one thing, he lost his life. So clearly, we've learned a lesson in that. The reality is, everything does matter. And I think it's so important the way that we represent ourselves. Everything matters when no one's looking.
Mm.
If it matters when no one's looking, then how much more is it going to matter when everybody's watching?
You talked about that importance of modeling it for others. I've watched you model it to others, but I'd love for you maybe to share with our listeners some place where you just took that extra step because you wanted those around you to see that one more set of eyes on a situation.
Leading by example is so important. Believe that anyone on my team would tell you, no matter what I'm doing, no matter what I ask them to do, I will always do it alongside of them. Just recently, I opened a show in New York City, and there's a lot of jobs in the circus that are not as pleasant as others. For instance, cleaning up after animals. And I will tell you that I'm always the first one there in those not so fun jobs. I lead in both senses. I lead on the office side, but also on the physical side. When the big top's coming down in New York City during a blizzard, I'm out there with them working. Now, obviously, there are times where I can't be there, but I try to arrange my schedule, my office schedule, to where when that physical stuff is happening, I can be right there with them, working alongside of them. Not always available, but 90% of the time I'm out there, whether it be driving a tractor or picking up, driving stakes, cleaning up after animals. It doesn't matter. I'm right there with them.
I love it. I know that you had this period in high school, living down there in Sarasota. Your family is ensconced in the community, and you're watching Michael Jordan play. Jordan was at his peak. He was at the peak of his powers, peak of his marketing powers. That really had impact on you.
Did.
You looked around and you knew that in your space, you and your family were best in class.
Yeah.
And that triggered in you a thought process that I'd love for you to share with us.
I remember seeing him play. I remember seeing his brand just explode and get bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, beyond what I think he could ever imagine. If an athlete can get that big by doing something that a lot of people do, but better than the rest, in a sense, I guess that's arguable, but in my opinion, he's the best player to ever walk the earth.
I'm with you.
But if he can get to that big of a brand, well, why can't I get to that big of a brand? I do something that's unique. There's only handfuls of people that do what I do. We all play basketball at one point, or most of us try it at least. It really clicked in me that there's opportunity here that maybe my family didn't see. One of the things that people don't necessarily understand about the Wallenda name is, yes, I was handed this amazing legacy, but the reality, it was a business that was struggling. It was a business that was in demise. It was a business that was going away. In fact, my great grandfather said it great in his book that he wrote: in the circus world, one day you eat the chicken and the next day you eat the feathers. That really is the reality of all live entertainment. One day you eat the chicken, one day you eat the feathers. You don't know when your next gig is. My mom also wrote a book in the 80s called The Last of the Wallendas, because she didn't feel like there was going to be a future in our industry. The circus world was going away. People just weren't attending like they used to. People weren't interested as they used to be. My parents really encouraged me through those years to consider going off to college and go a different direction and leave the industry. quite contrary to what people would think. 7 generations in your family, 200 years, you were destined for it. I started walking a wire. I was going to say I started walking at about 18 months old, but the reality is my mom was 6 months pregnant with me and still walking the wire.
Wow.
I've done it longer than my feet have been safely planted on terra firma. I was on the wire. It was a legacy that I was handed, but my parents were like, no, I don't think you can support a family. My parents certainly struggled growing up paying bills because there just wasn't jobs out there. There wasn't opportunity. What I saw in Michael Jordan's drive for greatness and that drive for perfection, if I can have that same drive and I can build a brand outside of what my family could even imagine. The Bible says that God will bless us with more than we can all ever ask or imagine. And that's truly the story of my life. And Michael Jordan was that role model. I saw where he got to. Now, I'm not quite where Michael Jordan is yet. I don't wear Hanes yet, but we'll see. Maybe those opportunities will come in time.
Those Air Wallendas are really incredible.
They are pretty cool. I have to say, his mom doesn't make his shoes like my mom makes mine.
No, he outsourced that to a little company called Nike.
Yeah. I knew that the opportunity was there. And I saw what my great grandfather had done. He'd broken 4 or 5 Guinness World Records. And every time that he broke a world record, it just built his brand bigger and bigger. And then it was passed on to my grandparents, passed on to my parents. And they sort of rode the wave of my great grandfather. My great grandfather created the 7-person pyramid. It was performing in 1962 in Detroit, Michigan. As my family performed that pyramid in front of a live audience, about halfway out on the wire, the pyramid collapsed. 2 of my family members died in that accident, and one of my uncles was paralyzed from the waist down. That pyramid was not recreated until 1998 when I was 18 years old. I started working at a restaurant as a busboy. I busted my butt. I swept when no one was looking as good as I did when people were looking. Also, while pursuing a college career, as I was accepted at Southeastern University here in Florida. And I was going out and performing during that time in the summer and then coming home because that was the only events that my parents had booked was during the summer. We got a phone call from somebody in Detroit, Michigan, and we were invited to go back and recreate that pyramid. It was at the same time where I was about to go off to college because that's really what my parents wanted me to do. Now, people struggle so much in life because they think so many people settle for status quo. I was going to go off and become a pediatrician. Would that have paid my bills and supported my family? Yes. But I think that would have been settling for status quo because my passion, my desires were to walk the wire, were to carry on this legacy that started back in the 1780s. We did that 7-person pyramid in Detroit, and the media from around the world was there. There were documentaries being filmed for A&E. There were documentary companies from all the way from China, Germany, all over the world. In fact, broke into Larry King's show for the first time, from what I understand, an entertainment story. During his show, there was a live report, and they broke in and showed us perform that 7-person pyramid. I remember seeing that and thinking, look, our industry isn't dying, it's changing. And we need to change with the times. And it was at that point that something clicked in my head. And I said, I'm going to start changing. Now, it doesn't always come easy. There are many setbacks. I went on to continue to work at that restaurant for several more years, all the while trying to promote my brand, eventually selling a contract in Japan where we went to Japan. And I broke the world record for the highest 4-level 8-person pyramid on the wire. Made headlines around the world. And I thought, great, here we go. We are going to be booked for the next 5 years straight. And the reality is I went back home and worked at that restaurant a few more years. So it doesn't always come easy. But what I've learned is the people that are most successful are the ones that don't give up. No matter what, every time they get knocked on their butt, they get back up and keep moving forward. That's what I continue to do. And throughout my career, there have been many setbacks, but I continued to get back up every time I got knocked down and continued to drive forward.
Our industry isn't dying, it's changing. You had to see that, you had to understand it, and then you had to go figure out, how do we adapt and embrace the change? You saw this big vision, which was these televised moments, walking the Grand Canyon, walking over Niagara Falls, and then the most spine tingling for me, the active volcano that you walked while we were working on this book together. Tell me a story about how you were adapting to a new set of circumstances and embracing the change that was your new industry, if you will.
After working in that restaurant for several years, breaking that world record, my wife and I got contracted to perform on Ringling Brothers' Barnum and Bailey Circus and headline there alongside of a close friend of ours. During the second year of that tour, we had this opportunity. I got a phone call from a promoter in Newark, New Jersey, brand new arena. It had just opened up a month prior to us showing up. And she said, look, we want to do something big and exciting. We want to do something that will garnish a lot of media so that they will come to this new arena and see Ringling Brothers. Immediately, I said, what an incredible opportunity. And she said, do you have any ideas? And I said, I have 50 ideas, but let's start with one. I ended up looking at some photos of the arena and thought, it'd be really cool if I can break a world record for the highest bicycle ride on a tightrope. It is very risky, very dangerous. Skyline of New York City is in the background. This will definitely bring in media. So I set out to get the permits to shut down the street, rent the equipment that was necessary, and eventually secured the Today Show that was going to cover it live. This was an amazing opportunity for me to really build my brand, and I needed to take advantage of it. But I also always knew that one of the challenges with the circus was, I've heard it my whole life, I still hear it, oh, do you have pink tights because you're in the circus? The reality is I've never worn pink tights in my life.
I don't know. I bet you look good in pink tights, Nick.
I might, but I'm not sure, and I don't want to find out. So I realized that I needed to dress a little different. So I ended up wearing jeans and a t-shirt, thinking that, hey, this is more relatable. I think that people need to realize that we are human beings. We're normal. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a son. I am all of those things. I just have a very unique occupation. People struggle with recognizing. In fact, I'll do these crazy walks and I'll come down and sign autographs, and kids will come up and touch me to see if I'm real because they just don't believe that I'm real. I have to sort of try to break down that barrier. So dressed normal, dressed average, didn't wear the rhinestones and the sequins and all that stuff. I just dressed normal. I also decided that I was going to walk across the wire one direction, and halfway out, I was going to sit down and I was actually going to call the Today Show studio and call Matt Lauer. Believe it or not, I had the phone number. If you watch the video, you can see it. It was written in Sharpie on my hand. This was the days of flip phones. So it wasn't like speed dial or just press talk twice or whatever. I got out to the middle of the wire, mind you, 135 feet up, no safety devices. I sat on the wire, pulled out the flip phone. I looked at my wrist, I dialed the number, and I called the studio. Had a conversation with the studio with Matt and got back up, rode across the wire, got to the other side. When I got to the other side, Kerry Sanders, who was the correspondent there on that side waiting for me, said, Nick, what's next? And I said, you know what, Kerry, I want to be the first person in the world to walk a wire directly across the Grand Canyon. I knew that I had this opportunity, but I needed to capitalize on it. It wasn't, hey, I'm going to go break a world record. And mind you, there are many other wire walkers out there that, in my opinion, are much better than me. They could ride a bike across the wire and break that world record. But did they have the understanding of what it would take to change and build a brand? A lot of people don't look at the big picture. They're handed this business from one generation to the next, and they just carry that business along rather than going, you know what, I've been handed this incredible opportunity. It's up to me to take advantage of that opportunity. It's up to me to make it bigger and bolder and stronger and be creative and to think outside of the big top. In my business, it's not the box, it's the big top. And that's really what I've strived to do and taken every opportunity that I have. The day after that walk, we had every network across the country calling saying, hey, we want Nick to walk across the Grand Canyon on our network.
Wow. So how do I take what I've been given or what I've got and begin that creative process or look for those opportunities? Any advice that you'd give to those who might have something, but not sure exactly what to go and work to build?
Don't be scared to take risks. That's what I do for a living. It's funny, in the book, towards the end of our book, Facing Fear, I talk about one of my greatest fears, which is opening up my own circus. But don't be scared to take risks. Don't be scared to fail. Failure is nothing but a stepping stone. Most inventors, most creators, most creative people continue to fail over and over again before they find that success, before they find that invention that works, the one that grabs. In fact, I have a friend who happens to be a billionaire, and he was self-made. He invented about 30 products. It was 31 that actually took off. Now he's invented 45 more, and none of them have done anything. But he wasn't scared to fail. He failed 30 times before he was successful. Reality is it just takes one. It's so easy for us to go, no, I don't want to take that risk because I might fail. It's that fear of failure. I try to use that fear of failure to drive me to twist and ebb and flow as things start to change. Okay, well, this is starting. How do I change this? Okay, well, that doesn't work. Well, let me make an adjustment here. Most people won't take that first step because they're scared of failing. Well, my great grandfather started this company. It's always been the same, and that's what's been great. But the reality is, eventually, we'll see sales start to dip slowly, slowly, slowly. And it's up to us, who are the heirs of that incredible company, to be creative and to be willing to take risks.
You take risks for a living, and yet still, even within the context of that risk taking lifestyle, you have to take risks in order to keep the lifestyle growing, in order to keep the opportunities growing. I love it. Just recently, you were inducted into the Circus Hall of Fame down in Sarasota. What an honor. Everyone from the governor of Florida, the Rob Gronkowski, David Copperfield, all these people are in the video
Yes.
congratulating you for your success.
Thank you.
There's a seminal moment for you covered in the book. It happened in 2017. You're trying an 8-person pyramid in Sarasota, and things didn't go as planned.
Yeah. My family and I were training to break a world record. It was our own world record. In fact, it was the one that we had set in 2001 for the 8-person pyramid. Well, we wanted to do something big in our hometown. We decided we were going to raise the bar, literally 10 more feet. We trained for several months. We're doing great. Everything went incredible in practice. 2 days before we were going to premiere it before Guinness World Records and a live audience, we did what we always do, which is we train down low. Everything we do in a safe setting. So we train at 2 feet off the ground. Then we go up to 10 feet off the ground. And then it's really a mind game. The wire's the same, whether it's 2 feet off the ground or over the Grand Canyon. The environment changes, but the wire's still the same. We brought the wire up 28 feet. We did one rehearsal. It was a little bit rocky, a little bit shaky, but that's normal. A lot of nerves, a lot of anxiety, a lot of tension. First time you go up high with a pyramid like that. We called it a night. We'll come back tomorrow. We'll rehearse one more time, and then we'll premiere it. We came back the next day. I did what I do before every pyramid, which is check in with every performer. I make eye contact with every single one of them and say, are you good? Are you ready? I make sure they acknowledge and make sure they look like they're there. I make sure they look like they're calm and collective and that we're ready to go, because it's 8 people. We're all linked together and it's all of our lives. As a leader, it's our responsibility to make sure our team is well prepared. And if they're not, I don't care if there's 1,000 or 10,000 or the president of the United States is in the audience, the Queen of England, doesn't matter who's in the audience. If you're not ready, if you're not prepared, we won't take that first step. And I'll cover for you in front of a live audience. I'll figure out a way to cover for you so you won't look bad, but I'll cover for you. And I think that's part of being a great leader, is always making sure that your team is well prepared. And if they're not, preparing them. How do I help you? How do I make you more prepared? How can I not only help, but challenge you to become greater at what you do? With my team, it is very clear. You're not going to take that first step. None of us are, unless you're fully prepared and ready for this. And if you're not, I'm going to arm you with the right tools to become prepared and ready.
And they have to know they can trust you to be there. You will have their back. You need their front, but you also need their back, and you're going to have it.
That's right. Went up on the wire. Everything seemed normal. We started the 8-person pyramid formation, started to walk out on the wire. And about 10 steps from the platform that I took off from, I was in the very back on the bottom. My worst nightmare became a reality. That pyramid collapsed to the ground. And by the grace of God, I caught the wire. My cousin caught the wire. One of the wire walkers stayed standing, but 5 of my closest friends and family members fell to the ground. Sort of everything freezes during stressful moments for me. Everything kind of stops, and I am very focused. I'm very good under a lot of pressure. It's one of the blessings from my career. I got down off that wire. In fact, I had a friend that was about 20 feet away from my sister who had fallen. And I was up 28 feet in the middle of a wire, and I made it down and to her before he could even get to her. And I sort of made my rounds, checking all 5 of the performers. My sister had landed on her head. Somehow she'd hit a guy wire and landed right on her face. There were a lot of broken bones, a lot of severe injuries, and immediately rushed all 5 performers to the hospital, finding out soon after that 4 of them were fine, but my sister, we didn't even know. My sister certainly had it the worst. In fact, my sister was in a coma for 2 weeks. She'd broken every bone in her face. Didn't know if she was going to survive, didn't know if she was going to live, didn't know whether she'd walk again. And I'll never forget sitting in the hospital waiting room, not knowing the outcome of my sister's health, and my dad came in, and I had to make a tough decision the next day. And my dad said to me, he goes, "Nick, you have an event tomorrow, are you gonna get back on the wire?" He knows how much wire walking means to me, to my family, to our history, and to who we are, and how important it is to get back on the horse. At that point, I didn't even consider getting back on the wire. It was related to respect for those that had fallen. Here I am the leader of the troop, and we fell. That pyramid collapsed. I was at the helm. I was in charge. I said, "Dad, I wasn't even thinking about getting back on the wire yet." "Yeah, you're probably right, Dad. I probably should get back on the wire. It's probably the right thing to do. But first, I want to talk to everybody that's injured." So I went around to each hospital room and I asked the individuals, "Do you think I should get back on the wire?" Everybody, hands down, said, "Yes, you need to get back on there. That's what you do. You need to get back on that horse. You need to get back up there right away before fear creeps in."
Right.
I got back up the next day and performed for the next month straight. What I didn't realize was while I was performing, I was allowing these thoughts to come into my mind, these thoughts of you're going to fall, you're a failure, you were the leader, you let this pyramid fall. I relate to the negative thoughts as a like a weed growing in the garden. If you don't pluck that weed out immediately, it'll eventually spread seeds and germinate, take over the whole garden. I started watering those seeds. I started agreeing with those thoughts. I started realizing that, yeah, you know what? You are a failure. Yeah, you could fall. Look at your sister. After that, I took some time off. Now, meanwhile, my sister had come out of a coma. She was still in a wheelchair, but doing good. And we knew that she would be able to walk again. During that time off, I really started to germinate those seeds and started to continue to believe more and more of how I wasn't good enough. I wasn't going to make it. I was going to fall. I was going to lose my life. I got back on the wire training for the 7-person pyramid about 3 months or so after that. And that fear got so powerful that it got to the point where I remember getting off that wire, going down in tears to my apartment in New York City and telling my wife I was never going to get on the wire again. I was done. I was defeated. My wife at that point had said, "Nick, you live by the words never give up. You do what you do to inspire others, that nothing is impossible. You sign your autographs, never give up. You forgot who you were." That conversation made me realize that I had to relearn who I was. I had to relearn everything that I was taught my entire life, something that I'd practiced throughout my entire career. When I step up to the edge of the skyscraper, I look down just like anyone else. My heart starts to race. I get nervous. That's danger. You fall off the edge, it's dangerous. But no, you've trained and prepared properly. You'll be okay. After that accident, I forgot that I was in control of my thoughts. I forgot that I can say, "No, you've walked the wire thousands of times safely. Therefore, you're going to be fine. The odds are on your side." But it's funny how our mind is programmed to focus to the negative. It's to focus to that one failed business, not the 4 that are extremely successful. It's to focus on the not so good moments. I walked up to the edge of the Grand Canyon. It was windy out that day. I was 1,500 feet up, walking 1,500 feet across on a windy day, no safety devices. I walked up to the edge and I told myself, "You'll be okay because you trained in 90-mile-an-hour winds." And so far, the winds haven't exceeded 35 miles per hour. As I began walking, I made my way out towards the middle. I started getting hit with 2 gusts of wind that I believe were about 48 miles per hour, according to Jim Cantori, who was our weatherman on site. I remember kneeling down and my mind wanting to go down that negative rabbit hole of you better hold on, you better wait for help, call for the rescue team. And then immediately I retrained my brain, if you will, said, "No, you know what? You were made to do this. You trained for this. You prepared for this. You've been in worse situations in training. Therefore, you'll make it safely to the other side." We are in control of our thoughts. Our thoughts are not in control of us. I can't allow my mind to go down those negative rabbit holes. I get in an argument with my wife. I think about 22 years of, well, we got in that fight and she nagged me that day. Now my mind's completely opposite. When I get in an argument with my wife, I'm programmed to think about how incredible my wife is and programmed to think about all the incredible times we've had together. But it's so easy for us to focus on the negative rather than cutting those negative thoughts off and realizing, you know what? I'm going to focus on the positive. And there's something so powerful about a positive mind. It's something I didn't believe in when I was younger, but I remember my wife telling me when we were first married, "You need to stop thinking negative, you need to be positive," and rolling my eyes at her. Now that I live that life, I can promise you I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have that mindset.
Mm.
My mind goes directly to the volcano. While in the middle of that volcano, winds stronger than over the Grand Canyon directly in my face, nothing I ever could have imagined. Now, I trained and prepared, therefore, I made it safely across from one side to the other. But the winds were so strong in my face at one point that I went to take a step and I got knocked. Got stopped. Literally, the wind was such a wall that came in a spiral that it stopped me. I couldn't move. Didn't matter. I continued to push forward. No matter how strong those winds were, I continued to push forward. No matter how many things were following at my left and following at my right, and no matter how strong the winds, the gases became extremely thick, I continued to push forward. And I think that's so important for people to realize is it's so important to keep moving forward. So many people get gripped by fear. A 48-mile-an-hour gust of wind comes with them up on the Grand Canyon and they freeze. They stop in their tracks. When we get into those moments where we are scared, we have to keep moving. We can't stop because if we're stopping, we're degressing. We need to continue to progress no matter what, no matter how strong the winds are, no matter how strong the gases are. I can't stress it enough. It's easier to stop, at least we think it is. But the reality is, once we stop, those winds will start to get stronger and start to force us the wrong direction. So it's important that we keep moving.
It is always moving forward. It's taking that next step, one foot literally in front of the next.
Even in my business mind and business world, I am always thinking of the next. When I'm getting permission to walk across the Grand Canyon, I'm already working on permission to walk across Times Square. And when I'm walking across Times Square, I've already got permission to walk across a volcano. Even more vast than that. I'm working on a business outside of wire walking. I'm working on opening my own circus. I'm working on a speaking tour. I am always working on the next thing. Even though I'm in this position now and making sure that I maintain perfection, I'm continuing to work on other things at the same time, continuing to think ahead and prepare.
To almost dueling narratives, perfection in the present and the step forward, constantly thinking about how we're going to take that next step and we're not going to stop and let the wind start to blow us backwards.
Yep.
Two amazing narratives. And often we hear people talk about one or the other.
Yeah.
So you have your sister in your lap,
Yeah.
you rush her to the hospital, she's in a coma. The damage done is unbelievable.
Yep.
Now, I will tell you, I had the chance while working on the book to go to Las Vegas and meet your sister. What an amazing woman.
She sure is.
What a fireball of strength. A couple of years later, an opportunity comes
Yeah.
to walk 20 stories over Times Square.
Yeah. So I was working on getting permission for Times Square before the 8-person pyramid fell. I'll never forget going to the city, meeting with the mayor and his team, and finally locking in permission to shut down Times Square for 3 days, which is surreal that I was able to pull that off with my incredible team. I was on the plane flying back home. I had permission and I thought, you know what would be amazing if my sister would walk over Times Square with me. As soon as the plane landed, I got on the phone. I called my dad and my mom and I said, guys, what do you think? I'd like to invite Liana to be a part of this. They were like, I think it's an amazing idea. Call her and ask her. And if she wants to, then that would be amazing.
Dude, are you kidding me? Every other parent I would know in the whole world would say, last time you invited her to do something.
Yeah,
But yeah, your family thinks differently.
for sure. Look, we live by the words, the show must go on, no matter what.
Right.
Keep in mind, this isn't our career. This isn't just our occupation. This is our life. Life is on the wire. Everything else is just waiting. That applies to everybody. For us, it's very surreal. I got on the phone. I called my sister. I said, Liana, I just got permission to walk across Times Square. And I want to know if you want to walk with me. And the phone was quiet. Oh man, did I make a mistake? Did this bring up bad memories? She started crying. I said, I'm sorry. And she's like, no, no, no. That would be a dream come true. I couldn't even fathom this opportunity coming to me. Yes, yes, emphatically, yes, I want to do it. She flew down to Sarasota from Vegas and we started training together. Now, I had been through that fire already, if you will. I had gone through the mental anguish. I had gone through the negative thoughts in my mind. I had given up walking the wire, per se, So I knew where her mind was going to go prior to her even getting out on that wire for the first time training. Now, she'd gotten on the wire. In fact, 2 months after the accident, she was able to stand up. That day, she got on a wire 2 feet off the ground. That was her thing. Can I get back on this wire? But she hadn't walked a wire this high, let alone this wire this long. In fact, she didn't walk a wire that long or that high in her entire career. That was the longest and the highest she'd ever done. During her training, I sat there and watched her in my backyard. I have a wire that's 700 feet long. And I watched her get on that wire and I watched her lose her mind, freak out. She didn't say anything. And I purposely rigged that wire extremely loose, extremely unstable. And my dad and I sort of had a conversation about this. My dad didn't think I was handling it right. And I said, Dad, I want her to realize how serious this is. And I want this to be the hardest thing she's ever done so that when she gets to Times Square, she's so overly prepared and that wire's so stable that it'll be like a walk in the park. That's exactly what happened. She went through this mental anguish. She struggled. In fact, during training, it was taking her about 25 to 30 minutes to walk that wire. It took me 7 minutes. It was taking her 25 to 30. We'd walk out. She'd sit down. I'd step over her. She'd stand back up. And we'd walk to opposite ends. Behind the scenes, I'm an executive producer on all my specials. Normally, there'll be an hour and a half lead up, and then we'll get on that wire walk for 15, a couple commercials, and then it's the end of the show. I'm talking to my other producers, and I'm like, guys, we're going to have to change the lay of the show because it was taking her so long. The idea was I'm going to let her start a lot earlier than me. I'll meet her in the middle, etc. We are a family of faith and we pray a lot together. We are very, very strong believers. We listen to a lot of worship music, and that's really what drives me and gives me a lot of strength. And got down from the wire one night and we prayed as a family, went home, came back the next morning. We got on the wire, walked across. I turned around and she already got to the platform in about 7 or 8 minutes. So we got down and I said, Liana, what changed? She said, I remembered who I was. I was praying last night. I remembered what I was created for.
Wow.
So many of us hit turmoil. We hit challenging times and we forget who we are. We forget what we were made to do. She remembered who she was. And from that moment on, she walked the wire. In fact, she was quicker than me at times. And I told her, you have to slow down a little bit because you're walking too fast. In fact, Michael Strahan hosted that special on ABC. And he said it best. He said, when you return from an injury, you don't return to the Super Bowl. Your sister not only returned to the Super Bowl, but she won MVP.
Right. Yeah.
I was able to literally walk through that fire, walk across that wire, deal with the mental anguish that she dealt with, give up on the wire, deal with all the turmoil and the stress and the fear, that 4-letter word fear that was debilitating, so that I was able to now coach my sister through the same situation that I had gone through. Now, mind you, I didn't fall and break every bone in my face. I don't have 73 screws and plates in my face. But because I was able to go through that, I was able to say, you know what, Liana, I've been there. And this is what I did to deal with it. Man, what an amazing opportunity. It's really a mirror image of God, our Father, who goes before us in every situation as well.
What a great moment for her. What a great moment for you. What a great moment for all of us. We need to reach back and remember, what were we created to do? And if you have that gift, it is our responsibility to step out and share it.
That's right. Throughout life, throughout careers, throughout running businesses, we get so many bumps and bruises and scars. Every single one is just taking a little bit away from who we were when we were young and ambitious and full of energy and just started running that company. We all need to step back and remember, wait, that's who I am. These things have happened to me, but they've only made me stronger, not weaker. And I need to remember who I am and who I was.
You know, for those listening who experience fear regularly, probably most of us, what can you teach us about how to positively use what you've learned about fear?
People say you're fearless to me all the time. And the funny thing is, I'm far from fearless. What I was taught from a young age was that there's a positive fear and there's a negative fear. There's a fear that's good and there's a fear that's bad. Now, the good fear is the fear that says, hey, you know what? That snake is poisonous. I need to give it some distance. The bad fear tells us to run away from that animal. Now, a snake may not be the perfect example, but let's say it's a grizzly bear in the wild. The worst thing you can do is turn around and run away in fear. The best thing you can do is stop in your tracks and stand your ground. And that bear will respect that and turn around. Fear can be good and fear can be bad. I, in my life, have realized that fear has taught me to train and prepare harder. Fear has taught me a deep respect for what I do. I believe there's a very fine line between fear and respect. I respect the wire. I respect the strong winds. I respect the heavy mist of Niagara Falls. So I'll train with goggles on that are completely fogged up where I can't even see. If the winds are going to be 45 miles an hour over Niagara Falls, I'm going to train with 90-mile-an-hour winds. Fear can drive you or it can stop you in your tracks, but it's really how we perceive that fear. There's a fear of failure that doesn't allow us to take our first step, but you can also use that fear, as I do, to drive me. There's something almost exciting about taking on a risk or a challenge off the wire. I'm talking about in the business world, in my personal life. There's something thrilling about stepping through that fear. I would tell you one of the main reasons why I have been as successful as I am in my world is because I am consistently stepping out of my comfort zone. Everything I do, from public speaking, let me tell you what, when I first started public speaking, I was more scared to get on that stage and talk to 250 people or 500 people or 1,000 people than I am to get on the wire over the Grand Canyon. I continually, though, push myself and step through that fear and continue to walk forward, continue to step out of that comfort zone and step over that comfort zone. I'm not insane. When I get on the wire over the Grand Canyon, that's stepping out of my comfort zone. I'm 1,500 feet up with winds. Yeah, I've walked the wire my whole life. It doesn't matter. That's still stepping out of my comfort zone.
I love it. And it's not just about stepping out of your comfort zone. It's if you respect the fear, you prepare harder.
That's right.
You prepare for things even greater than you might face, which allows you to revert back and to go to that place, as Michael Strahan said, where you could play in the Super Bowl because you've prepared for it. So it's not whether or not you have fear, because we all do. It's what you do when fear strikes.
That's right.
In your case, and the lesson you're teaching us today, it's an opportunity for you to step out if you've done the hard work.
That's right.
Man, I love it. Nik, I learn from you each and every time we talk, and today is no exception. This concept about how we collectively can all use the lessons that fear can teach us and that we can grow through them is so, so powerful. I want to thank you today for the time. I want to thank you for the willingness to open up about a really difficult window and to offer each of us learning on how we can grow and be better. Thank you, Nik, for being a corporate competitor.
Thank you so much, Don.
Before we take a look back at the best lessons from today's show, can I ask a favor from you? Would you be willing to leave Corporate Competitor Podcast a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform? Doing so will help us continue adding value to others. Okay, I'm not sure how I can sum up in just a few paragraphs here all that we just learned, but I'm going to try to take a shot at a couple of the biggest moments for me. One, I loved the discussion about Nik and his sister actually getting on the wire over Times Square after she had fallen and walking that wire again. But to get there, to make her way through the practice, to be ready to go, she had to have that aha moment that I remembered who I was and what I was created to do. That moment for each and every one of us can be so empowering. It can allow us to deal with the dueling narratives that Nik talked about, that desire and that understanding that in order to be successful in the moment, we have to be perfect at what we're doing right now. We have to make sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, all the rigging is done exactly as it should so we could step out on the wire. But at the same time, we're focused and perfect in our present. We have to be thinking about our future. We have to be constantly looking at what will be next, because next is where greatness comes our way. Nik said it. The show must go on. We have to be ready in moments of fear to know that it's time to step up. Staying on a knee does you no good. Let's go out today. Let's conquer that fear. Let's all go be greater corporate competitors. And one last thing before you go. If you enjoy leadership conversations, I want to recommend another podcast to add to your queue. It is called, quite simply, the Leadership Podcast, hosted by Jan and Jim, who have become friends after I was a guest. They have more than 300 episodes to choose from, with guests including Daniel Pink, Margaret Heffernan, and Carol Robin. The Leadership Podcast stays true to its mission. We study leaders. So I encourage you to check out their show. I put a link to my episode in today's show notes. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir.
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.